The night had a strange stillness to it, the kind that makes every sound feel louder, every thought sharper. Ethan Cruz sat by the window of his 12th-floor apartment, watching the Manila skyline blur beneath a slow drizzle. It was nearly midnight, but his wife hadn't come home yet. Laura had texted an hour ago, saying she was still with clients, a line she'd used so often lately it had lost all meaning. The hum of the city below couldn't drown out the unease twisting inside him. Their marriage was barely holding together. Polite smiles in public, long silences at home. He tried convincing himself it was just work stress, but her sudden changes were too obvious to ignore. The perfume that wasn't hers, the late-night showers, the locked phone. Every small thing had started to feel like a confession. Ethan had always been a logical man. He handled business disputes, financial negotiations, even family drama, with a calm detachment that others admired. But love was never logical. It burned quietly, and when trust began to fade, it turned to smoke that choked everything in its path. He opened a folder on his laptop, a list of call logs and receipts he'd quietly gathered over the past week. He wasn't proud of it, but the need to know had become stronger than his pride. A strange number appeared repeatedly, often around midnight. Once, Laura had stepped out for a walk and called that same number for nearly 20 minutes. Ethan exhaled slowly. The doubt had become unbearable. He wasn't just losing sleep. He was losing himself. His mind drifted to the early days. The way Laura used to laugh so freely, the warmth of her presence, the way she'd wait for him outside his office with coffee, and that impatient smile. Somewhere along the way, that light had dimmed, and he couldn't even remember when it started to fade. A gust of wind rattled the half-open window. He stood, closing it, and in the glass reflection he caught a glimpse of himself. Tired eyes, unshaven, shirt half-buttoned. He didn't look like the man he used to be. He looked like someone left behind. The sound of keys in the lock startled him. Laura entered, her heels tapping softly against the wooden floor. She froze for a moment, seeing him awake. "You're still up?" she asked casually, removing her earrings. "Couldn't sleep," he replied. His tone was calm, but his eyes followed her every movement. The way she avoided his gaze, the faint tremor in her hands as she placed her purse on the table. "Long day?" he asked. "Exhausting," she said quickly. "The clients kept dragging the meeting. You know how it is." He nodded, though he didn't. Laura disappeared into the bathroom, and soon the sound of running water filled the silence. Ethan sat back down, eyes fixed on the phone she had left charging on the counter. His heart pounded. For a brief moment, he thought about checking it, about crossing that final line between suspicion and truth. But he couldn't. Not yet. When she returned, she kissed him lightly on the cheek. "Good night," she whispered, almost mechanically, before disappearing into the bedroom. Ethan stayed where he was, staring at the city lights. Something inside him shifted that night, a quiet certainty that whatever truth he was afraid of already existed, waiting for him to uncover it. As the clock struck 2, he opened his laptop again and searched, "Private investigators in Manila." He scrolled past a dozen names before one caught his eye. Marco Velasquez, discretion, results, no drama. Ethan hesitated, then clicked the contact form. His hands trembled as he typed the message. He didn't know it yet. But that single decision, to seek the truth, would unravel far more than he ever imagined. The morning came gray and heavy, like the city itself was holding its breath. Ethan barely slept. The decision he'd made in the quiet hours of dawn replayed in his mind as he scrolled through his phone. An unread message blinking from Marco Velasquez Investigations. "Mr. Cruz, I received your inquiry. We can meet today. Confidential location, the Harbor Cafe, 8 p.m. The tone was precise, almost mechanical. Ethan replied with a simple, "I'll be there." The day dragged. Every call from work, every email felt meaningless now. His mind was consumed by that one appointment, by the image of a man who made a living uncovering secrets, the kind of truths that destroyed lives, but set people free. By the time he reached the cafe that evening, the rain had returned. The place was quiet, dimly lit, smelling of roasted coffee and wet pavement. A jazz song played softly in the background. Ethan scanned the room until his eyes settled on a man seated in the corner, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Cruz?" the man asked as Ethan approached. His voice was low, steady, confident. "Marco Velasquez," Ethan said, extending a hand. Marco's handshake was firm, his gaze sharp but polite. He had that kind of face that didn't give away emotion, the kind that made you trust him without knowing why. His dark suit fit perfectly, and a faint scar near his jawline gave him an edge, as if he'd seen more than he ever spoke of. They sat. Marco opened a worn leather notebook and clicked his pen. "Tell me what you're looking for." Ethan hesitated, his throat tightening. "I think my wife is seeing someone. I need to know who. I need proof." Marco nodded slowly, jotting down brief notes. "How long have you suspected it?" 2 weeks. Maybe longer. Any evidence so far?" "Just her behavior," Ethan admitted. "And a number she keeps calling." "I don't know who it belongs to." Marco leaned back, studying him for a moment. "Most of my clients say the same thing. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes it's just fear." Ethan looked down. "I need the truth, whatever it is." The investigator smiled faintly, not with kindness but understanding. "Truth always has a cost, Mr. Cruz. Are you ready for it?" Ethan nodded. "I am." Marco closed his notebook. "Send me her photo schedule and the number you mentioned. I'll start tonight." Something in his tone carried quiet confidence. Almost too confident. Ethan mistook it for professionalism. What he didn't notice was the flicker of intrigue in Marco's eyes when he heard Lara's name. They parted with a handshake and a promise. Ethan felt a strange relief, believing he'd finally taken control. As he walked out into the drizzle, he didn't see Marco linger by the window, watching him disappear into the traffic lights. Marco's reflection in the glass smirked faintly. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and scrolled to a contact saved simply as L. His thumb hovered over it, then pressed call, when the voice on the other end answered. Soft, familiar, hesitant, his tone changed completely. "Hey," he said quietly. "It's me. We need to talk. Now." Outside, thunder rolled through the Manila sky. Lara Cruz couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. For days, the same silver sedan seemed to appear in her peripheral vision. Outside her office, near the cafe where she met friends, even across the street from her apartment. At first, she dismissed it as paranoia. But tonight, as she locked the front door and caught sight of headlights flickering before fading away, her heart began to race. She walked inside, breathing heavily, pressing her back against the wall. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. She thought of Ethan. How distant he'd been lately. How every conversation felt like an interrogation wrapped in politeness. He hadn't accused her outright, but she could feel the suspicion hanging between them like smoke. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. He knows. "Be careful who you trust," Lara froze. The screen dimmed, reflecting her pale face. She typed back, "Who is this?" But the message failed to send. The unease grew heavier. Then her phone rang. A familiar voice on the other end. "Hey," Marco said softly. "It's me." "You sound tense." "I just got a strange message," she whispered. "Someone's watching me." There was a short pause, then his voice dropped. "It's him. Ethan must have hired someone." Her stomach turned. "You think he knows?" "I'm sure of it," Marco replied. "But don't panic. I can handle this." "Handle it how?" she asked. "I'll find out how much he knows, and make sure he doesn't find out about us." Lara leaned against the counter, trembling. "Marco, maybe we should stop. This is getting too dangerous." His tone shifted, calm but commanding. "No, Lara, we've come too far. You deserve better than a man who doesn't trust you." The line went silent for a moment, filled only with the faint hiss of rain outside. Lara closed her eyes. She knew he was right about Ethan's distrust, but Marco's certainty carried something else. a darkness she didn't want to name. Unbeknownst to her, Marco had sent that anonymous message himself. Every move, every word was a part of his carefully spun web. To Ethan, he was the loyal investigator chasing the truth. To Lara, he was the savior protecting her from a jealous husband. In truth, Marco was playing both of them, savoring the power it gave him, the control over two lives colliding in chaos. That night, he sat in his dim office, walls lined with photographs of Lara, some taken under the guise of surveillance, others during their secret meetings. He traced his finger along one of them, the image of her smiling faintly beneath a street lamp. "She's perfect," he muttered to himself. When Ethan called, Marco's tone changed instantly. "I've been following her," he said, voice professional. "She's been meeting someone. No clear photos yet, but I'll have more soon." Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "Do whatever it takes. I need proof." "Of course," Marco replied smoothly. "You'll have it." After ending the call, he leaned back, smiling to himself. Two different tones, two different truths, both believing his version of reality. But Lara wasn't as naive as he thought. Later that night, she met with her friend Mira, the only person she trusted. Over coffee, Lara confessed everything. The affair, the fear, the feeling of being watched. "Lara," Mira said softly, gripping her hand. "Men like him, both of them. They don't love you. They just want to own you." Lara's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to do anymore." "End it," Mira urged. "Before it ends you." Lara promised she would. But promises made in fear rarely survive the night. As she drove home under the rain, her phone buzzed again. This time a photo of her, taken from across the street. No message, no name. Just proof that whoever was watching hadn't stopped. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days, turning the streets into glistening mirrors that reflected the city's sleepless glow. Inside Lara and Ethan's home, everything looked calm on the surface. But beneath that calm, something poisonous was spreading. Marco Velasquez stood alone in the hallway that morning, wearing the polite smile of a man who knew how to hide his intentions. Ethan had just let him in, believing he was there to install security cameras that would help confirm Lara's infidelity. To Ethan, Marco was a savior. To Marco, this was just the next step in a game he'd already mastered. "Just a few discreet spots," Marco said smoothly, gesturing toward the living room corners. "They'll pick up sound and motion without being visible." Ethan nodded, his voice low. "Whatever it takes. I need to see the truth with my own eyes." Marco offered a reassuring smile. "You will." When Ethan stepped out for a meeting, Marco worked quickly. The cameras weren't for Ethan's eyes alone. One went behind the photo frame on the wall, another under the lamp near the sofa, and a third in the bedroom vent. Each lens captured more than privacy. It captured the raw, intimate collapse of a marriage. Later that night, Marco returned to his office, dripping from the rain. He plugged the memory card into his computer, watching the first set of recordings load on screen. The images were mundane at first. Lara folding clothes, checking her phone, pacing restlessly. But Marco wasn't watching as an investigator. He was watching as a man obsessed. He leaned closer to the screen, tracing her image with his fingertip. "You don't even know how beautiful you look when you're afraid," he whispered. Hours passed. Then a new clip appeared. Ethan sitting alone, staring into space, a glass of whiskey in hand. His voice broke as he muttered, "What happened to us, Lara?" Marco's smirk faded for a moment. He saw something raw in that loneliness, something painfully human, but it vanished as quickly as it came. He clicked another video, erasing empathy with every frame. When Ethan called later that evening, his voice was trembling. "Did you find anything?" "Not yet," Marco lied. "But she's hiding something." "I can feel it. I just need proof," Ethan said quietly. "Once I know, I'll decide what to do." Marco's lips curved slightly. "You'll know soon." After ending the call, he forwarded selected clips to Ethan, the ones that made Lara look secretive, guilty, distant. But he kept the others for himself, the moments where she whispered on the phone, sometimes even saying his name. Those were his trophies. Meanwhile, Lara began noticing things out of place. The lamp turned slightly, a drawer left ajar. Her instincts screamed that someone had been there. That night, she confronted Ethan. "Did you bring someone into our home?" she demanded. Ethan hesitated. "For our safety," he said. "To protect us. Protect us from what?" Her voice cracked. "From me?" The silence that followed was sharper than any argument. She turned away, tears blurring her vision. Upstairs, one of Marco's hidden cameras recorded everything: her trembling, his guilt, the final fracture of their trust. Back in his office, Marco watched in fascination, a half-empty glass beside him. He labeled the new folder Phase 3, Pressure. Then he leaned back, smiling faintly. "Now," he murmured to himself, "let's see who breaks first." Lara had stopped sleeping in the same bed as Ethan. The distance between them had become more than emotional. It was now physical, visible, final. Nights were spent in separate rooms, silence filling the spaces where love once lived. Ethan barely spoke, and when he did, his words were cautious, like someone trying not to wake a ghost. He still believed the cameras would bring him clarity, but all they brought was noise, fragments of a life that no longer made sense. Every clip Marco sent felt like a dagger twisting deeper. Lara crying in the kitchen, Lara whispering to someone over the phone, Lara smiling, but never at him. Meanwhile, Lara was spiraling. She felt trapped in a house that no longer felt like home. Ethan's suspicion had turned the walls into prison bars, and the faint hum of electronics made her feel like she was constantly being watched. She needed air. She needed escape. And she found both in Marco. Their first meeting after weeks of silence took place in a small motel outside Quezon City, the kind of place where curtains stayed closed and names didn't matter. The rain followed her there, streaking down the windshield like tears she refused to shed. Marco was already waiting inside, leaning against the window with that same calm confidence that both frightened and comforted her. "You shouldn't have come," Lara whispered as she closed the door. "You called me," he replied gently. "You needed someone to listen. I needed someone to tell me what to do." He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "Then listen, you don't owe him anything anymore. You've been punished enough." Lara's lips trembled. "He's still my husband." "And I'm the man who actually sees you," Marco said. "Who knows what you're worth?" The line between right and wrong blurred in that single breath. He reached for her, and she didn't stop him. Their kiss was desperate, built on exhaustion and guilt, a collision of two broken souls searching for warmth in the cold. For a few moments, the world outside ceased to exist. But once the silence returned, so did the weight of reality. Lara sat at the edge of the bed, tears forming as she whispered, "What are we doing, Marco? This isn't love. It's running away." Marco crouched in front of her, lifting her chin. "Then let's keep running. Together." She stared at him, seeing the glint of obsession in his eyes. Something possessive, dangerous. It wasn't devotion. It was control dressed as affection. But she was too tired to resist it. She wanted to believe someone could still care. In the following days, their affair deepened. Secret messages, hidden meetings, moments stolen from time. To the world, Lara was still Mrs. Ethan Cruz, the loyal wife. But behind closed doors, she belonged to the man hired to expose her. Yet Marco's affection began to shift into something darker. He called constantly, questioned where she was, who she spoke to. When she didn't answer, he showed up unannounced, always with the same excuse. "I was worried." One night, as they sat in his car parked by the bay, Lara turned to him, her voice trembling. "You're starting to sound like him." Marco smiled faintly. "Maybe that's what it takes to protect you." She didn't reply. The air felt heavier than before, charged with an unease she couldn't name. She watched the reflection of the water shimmer across the dashboard and realized how far she'd fallen from herself. Across the city, Ethan sat in front of his computer, reviewing Marco's newest file. There was a photo attached, Lara standing outside the same motel she'd visited hours ago. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His hand shook as he clicked open the image. Her face said everything. He turned off the monitor and sat in the dark, tears filling his eyes before anger took their place. Something inside him broke quietly, without sound, the kind of break that doesn't heal. And as lightning flashed across the Manila skyline, Ethan whispered to himself, "I just wanted the truth." But what he found was something much worse. The night Ethan discovered the photo, something in him shifted. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was erosion, slow and merciless, like waves against stone. He sat motionless in the darkness of his study, the faint blue glow from the monitor outlining his silhouette. The image of Lara outside the motel repeated in his mind like a haunting refrain. Every blink brought it back sharper, crueler, more alive. He didn't sleep. He didn't move. He just listened to the quiet hum of the house, the same house that once echoed with laughter, now suffocating under suspicion. Somewhere upstairs, Lara's footsteps echoed faintly, but he couldn't bring himself to look at her. Every sound she made felt rehearsed, like an actor performing guilt. By morning, Ethan's eyes were bloodshot, his mind unraveling thread by thread. He left early, pretending to go to work, but instead drove aimlessly through the rain. His phone vibrated once, Marco's name flashing on the screen. Ethan stared at it for a long moment before answering. "Did you see what I sent?" Marco's voice was calm, calculated. "I saw," Ethan said flatly. "You deserve to know everything. She's been playing you, Ethan. I can get you the full footage, no edits." Ethan hesitated. "Why are you doing this?" Marco paused, then replied smoothly, "Because no one deserves to be humiliated like that." The call ended, but Ethan's thoughts didn't. He didn't notice the red light ahead or the horns blaring behind him. His mind was elsewhere, replaying years of marriage, searching for signs, realizing how many times Lara had said she loved him while her eyes told another story. That evening, when Lara tried to talk, he barely looked at her. "Ethan, we can't go on like this," she said softly. "You barely speak to me anymore." His jaw tightened. "Because I don't know who you are anymore." Lara froze, her eyes widening. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You tell me," he snapped, his voice low but venomous. "Who's the man you've been meeting?" The color drained from her face. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me." Ethan's hand slammed against the table, the sound slicing through the silence. Lara flinched. He took a step closer, his breathing uneven. "Was it worth it? Everything we built? For what?" Tears welled in her eyes, but before she could speak, he turned away, gripping the edge of the counter so hard his knuckles went white. The rage inside him wasn't just about betrayal, it was about helplessness. He had built his entire identity around her love, and now it was gone, leaving only the hollow shell of a man who didn't recognize himself. Lara backed away slowly, whispering, "You're scaring me." Ethan laughed bitterly. "You should be scared of yourself." That night, she locked herself in the guest room. Ethan stayed awake, pacing, replaying Marco's voice in his head, convincing himself there was still more truth to uncover, more lies to expose. His obsession grew claws. By dawn, he drove to Marco's office unannounced. The investigator greeted him with practiced sympathy. "You look terrible," Marco said, almost amused. "You need rest." Ethan leaned forward across the desk. "I need the recordings." "All of them?" Marco studied him, then nodded slowly. "You'll have them tomorrow. But Ethan—" His tone softened. "Sometimes the truth isn't what we think it is." Ethan's eyes darkened. "I'll decide that." He left the office with shaking hands, unaware that Marco was already watching him through a hidden camera feed, smiling faintly at the chaos he'd orchestrated. Outside, thunder rolled through the clouds as Ethan's car disappeared into the storm. The descent had begun, not with violence, but with silence. and silence, Marco knew, was the perfect place for madness to grow. The rain hadn't stopped since dusk. It poured relentlessly, beating against the windows like a warning no one would hear. The storm outside seemed almost prophetic, as if the heavens themselves were waiting for something to break. Inside the dimly lit house, Ethan sat alone. At the kitchen table, a glass of whiskey untouched before him, eyes fixed on the envelope Marco had left on his doorstep earlier that day. His hands trembled as he stared at it. 9 days since the wedding. 9 days since he thought he had built the perfect life. And now everything, every promise, every smile, had curdled into suspicion and betrayal. He finally opened the envelope. Inside was a flash drive, labeled in Marco's neat handwriting, "For your eyes only." Ethan's pulse quickened. He connected it to his laptop, and the screen flickered to life. The video began with grainy footage of Lara entering a hotel room, the same one from the earlier photos. But then, a second figure appeared. Ethan leaned forward, his breath shallow, his chest tightening as the man turned his head toward the hidden camera. It was Marco. For a long moment, Ethan couldn't breathe. His mind refused to process what his eyes were seeing. Marco, the man he trusted, the man he'd hired to expose his wife's infidelity, was the one she'd been sleeping with. The betrayal hit him in waves. First disbelief, then rage, then something colder, quieter. He watched until the end, his reflection flickering faintly in the dark screen. Then he stood, gripping the edge of the table until his knuckles went white. A storm raged outside, but inside, Ethan had gone eerily calm. Lara entered moments later, startled by the look on his face. "Ethan, what's wrong?" she asked, stepping closer. He didn't answer. He only stared at her, eyes hollow, voice flat. "How long?" She froze. "What are you talking about?" He played the video. Lara's gasp filled the silence. Her knees gave out, and she slumped against the wall. "Ethan, please! It's not what you think." "Not what I think." His voice cracked, low and sharp. "You slept with the man I hired to investigate you. You lied to me over and over while pretending to love me." Tears streamed down her face. "I made a mistake, Ethan. He manipulated me. He said you didn't trust me, that you were planning to leave." "Stop." His voice broke, trembling between fury and heartbreak. "Just stop." The clock ticked loudly between them, each second stretching into eternity. Lara reached for him, but he stepped back. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" he whispered. "You destroyed everything." For a moment, neither spoke. Only the thunder outside filled the silence. Finally, Lara whispered, "Ethan, please, we can fix this." He shook his head. "Some things can't be fixed." He turned away, leaving her sobbing on the floor. Upstairs, he sat in the dark, the video replaying in his mind. Marco's smirk, Lara's trembling hands, every truth that had been hidden behind lies. At midnight, Ethan picked up his phone and dialed Marco's number. Marco answered on the first ring, his tone casual. "Ethan, I assume you've seen it." "I saw everything," Ethan said quietly. "Good," Marco replied. "Now you understand who she really is." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And who are you, Marco?" A pause, then a low chuckle. "Someone who always finishes what he starts." The line went dead. Ethan sat there for a long time, the phone still in his hand, until the first hint of dawn crept through the window. The rain had stopped, but the world outside felt colder, emptier. Something inside him broke then, quietly, beyond repair. Because the night had not just revealed the truth, it had given him a reason to act on it. The morning after the storm was unnaturally quiet. The sky hung low and gray, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Ethan stood in the kitchen, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. His eyes were hollow, his movements slow, mechanical. On the table lay 2 coffee cups, one untouched, one cold, remnants of a life that had already died. Lara entered the room cautiously. "Ethan," she said softly, "we need to talk." He didn't look at her. His voice came out low, almost detached. "There's nothing left to say." She took a step closer. "Please, listen to me. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. He what?" Ethan's voice cracked, eyes flashing with something wild. "He seduced you? Tricked you? Made you forget you were my wife?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I made a mistake, Ethan. I was confused, lonely. I thought you didn't love me anymore." He stared at her for a long time. Then, in a voice that was almost gentle, he said, "I loved you so much it destroyed me." Silence fell between them, thick, suffocating. Then, without another word, Ethan turned away, walking toward the door. "Where are you going?" she asked. He paused, his back to her. "To end this." Lara watched him leave, her heart pounding, a sense of dread clawing at her chest. She didn't know what he meant. Or maybe she did. She grabbed her phone, trembling fingers scrolling to Marco's number. When he answered, she whispered, "He knows everything." Marco sighed. "Then it's time we make sure he doesn't do something stupid." But by the time Marco reached Ethan's house, the front door was already ajar. The rain had started again, light, cold, almost whispering. Inside, the lights were off, but a single lamp flickered in the living room. "Ethan?" Marco called out. His voice echoed faintly through the hall. "We need to talk, man." No answer. Marco stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His shoes left wet prints on the floor. As he moved deeper into the house, he noticed a faint metallic smell, sharp and unmistakable. Then he saw her. Lara lay on the floor near the sofa, her head turned slightly, eyes half open. Blood pooled beneath her, dark against the wooden floor. The sight made Marco's pulse spike, but his reaction wasn't grief. It was panic. "Ethan," he called again, louder now. "Where are you?" From the shadows, Ethan's voice came, low and calm. "Right here." Marco spun around. Ethan stood behind him, a gun in his hand, eyes dead and steady. "You ruined everything," Ethan said softly. "You took her from me and then you made me see it." Marco raised his hands. "Ethan, listen to me. She was using both of us. You don't need to—" "Don't talk." Ethan's tone was final. "You've done enough talking." A flash of thunder lit up the room, followed by a deafening crack. Marco fell. The silence that followed was unbearable, heavy, endless. The only sound was the steady drip of rain outside and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Ethan stood over the bodies, breathing unevenly, the gun still trembling in his grip. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he slowly lowered himself to the floor beside Lara, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I told you I loved you," he whispered, tears slipping down his cheeks. "Even now I do." Outside, the storm began to fade, the world returning to its muted calm. When the police arrived hours later, they found Ethan sitting in silence, his back against the wall, the gun resting beside him. There were no words left, only blood and silence. And in that silence, the truth lingered. Love had become its own executioner. The news broke at dawn. Double homicide in suburban Manila. Husband and private investigator found dead, wife among the victims. The anchor's voice was calm, detached, the kind of tone reserved for tragedies that happen to strangers. But for those who knew Ethan and Lara, the story felt like something out of a nightmare, a love story rewritten in blood. By the time detectives arrived, the storm had passed. The air was heavy, metallic, and still. Inside the small house, The walls seemed to hold the memory of what had happened hours earlier. The overturned lamp, the dried stains on the floor, the shattered glass. All silent witnesses to the moment when love and madness had become indistinguishable. Detective Cruz stood in the living room, his face unreadable. "He waited," he murmured to his partner. "He killed them both, then sat here until we found him." His partner, a younger officer named Reyes, glanced around. The neighbors said they heard shouting, then gunshots around midnight. No one went outside because of the rain. Cruz crouched beside Ethan's body, studying the expression frozen on his face. There was no rage there, no regret, only exhaustion. A man who had finally stopped running from himself. "Any note?" Cruz asked. Reyes shook his head. "Nothing written. Just the video file on his laptop. Looks like the one that started it all." Cruz sighed. The truth always comes too late. Outside, the first rays of morning cut through the clouds, glinting off the police tape that flapped gently in the wind. The street was quiet again, but the silence felt heavier now, as if grief itself had settled over the neighborhood. By afternoon, news crews had gathered. Reporters stood in the drizzle, narrating the story as if piecing together a puzzle that could never truly make sense. Sources say the husband, identified as Ethan Navarro, discovered his wife's affair with the very investigator he hired to follow her. What followed appears to be a crime of passion, but police are still uncovering the full story. Behind the yellow tape, the coroner's van pulled away, carrying with it the bodies that once shared a home. Inside, Cruz lingered for a moment longer. He looked at the photo frame lying face down near the couch. He picked it up and turned it over. A wedding picture, the two of them laughing under a canopy of flowers. 9 days married. 9 days before everything fell apart. He set it back down gently, his voice low. Sometimes love is just another way to lose yourself. Later, when the scene was cleared, rain began again, softer this time, almost cleansing. Across town, the story played on every screen. Comment sections filled with opinions. She deserved it. He was a monster. They both lost control. But none of them knew the quiet truth. How obsession eats slowly. How betrayal corrodes from the inside until the heart becomes something unrecognizable. That night, Detective Cruz sat in his car outside the station, watching the footage one last time. Lara's laughter, Marco's smirk, Ethan's broken stare. It was all there. The entire tragedy in under 2 minutes. When the screen went black, Cruz closed the laptop and whispered, "No winners. Only ghosts." He stepped out into the drizzle and lit a cigarette, the smoke curling upward like a final prayer. Somewhere in the distance, thunder murmured, faint, fading, like a story finally exhaling its last breath. Inside the empty house on Alder Street, the clock on the wall kept ticking, steady and indifferent, because time, unlike love, doesn't stop when the heart breaks. It just keeps moving, through blood, through silence, through the aftermath.